In every form of media, there are those that are considered to be the best of the best, or the best over a certain period of time. For anime, it's the big three, and for manga, we've got the dark trio. But the series we'll be talking about today isn't any of these two. And just like the previous two I stated, it's known to be one of the best out there. I'm talking about the manhwa, The Beginning After the End. For those of you who don't know what manhwa is, it's basically the Korean version of manga, with the main differences being the colors and the layout of the speech bubbles. But TBATE is also among what is considered to be the best of the best manhwas, with the other two being Solo Leveling, which recently got its anime adaptation, and Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint, which is its own masterpiece. But TBATE is something that has especially fascinated me. It's done things and has a lot of aspects that I've never seen before. But enough of me rambling, let's talk about what the story is about and who our main character Arthur is. Before Arthur was Arthur, he was an orphan who eventually grew up to be the king of a nation. And not just majestic ruler, but also a powerful defender of his country. He was looked up to as being the strongest and the most respected in his kingdom. However, with great power comes great loneliness. With no one to stand as his equal in either strength or position, Gray started to feel a certain emptiness. With him being an orphan, this wasn't the first time he's felt this feeling, but it still left a void within him. He wanted a reason or a chance to fight for himself, rather than his kingdom. Someone he could call an equal, or at least someone he could look up to. And with his rebirth, or should I say transfer, his wish was finally granted. He was now reborn in this new world with the name Arthur. He's the son of two retired adventurers who love him more than he could possibly know. Not to mention, he ends up being a magical genius. From what we can see, he's no longer alone and has wonderful parents and even a sister on the way. He's living his life peacefully and couldn't really have much to worry about. Now it should be safe to say that King Gray is no more. This is where the peaceful life of Arthur Leywin begins. Or at least that's how it was supposed to be. Now, there's a certain point in the series that takes Arthur on a path that he was destined to take, ever since he ended up coming to this world. For those of you who have read it, you probably know what I mean, and for those who haven't, all I can tell you is look out for a cave and a dragon. But after this turning point, life for Arthur is a painful journey. One of constant loss and him fighting for the things that he cares about the most. And even then, Arthur keeps on losing and losing and losing even more. And the lines between Arthur Leywin and King Gray start to blur. Which brings me to another thing that I love about this character. Most times when watching an Isekai, the characters themselves can go through either two things. One, they change as a character completely, leaving behind their old appearance and personality, or seeming like a completely different person than what they were before, with very little of their previous self remaining. Or two, which is the complete opposite, where the character is basically the same, with probably only their goal changing or a couple minor changes. In the beginning of the series, it seemed like Arthur would have been the former, with the way things were going. But as the series went on, the line between who he was before and who he is now started to blur. Arthur is supposed to have a peaceful life, one where he has a chance to do what he wants instead of what he feels like he has an obligation to do. One where he could spend time with his loving family and not be as lonely as he was in his previous life. But now it seems like what Arthur thought would be the life of his dreams turns out to be his second nightmare. We see more and more of King Gray as the series goes on, until eventually Arthur himself rids himself of the name Arthur altogether and fully embraces his identity as Gray. But it's not as if Arthur isn't there. He still feels like Arthur, but at the same time, he doesn't. Almost as if they're two existing souls in one body. And you could say that's because he lived two different lives, but this isn't the first time we've seen a character with two different lives. But it is the first time I felt like both their lives matter as much as they do in TBATE. It's an interesting concept that I actually like and still look forward to. But as with every anime and manga, an MC isn't enough to carry it all. Well, not unless you're Kumako, of course. A world where the characters can thrive is always necessary, and TBATE doesn't disappoint in any way. TBATE takes place in the continent of Dicathan, a land brimming with magic, mythical creatures, and political intrigue. The world building is complex, rich, and utterly satisfying. Dicathan is divided into several regions, each with its own distinct geography and culture. from the towering mountains of the Dwarven Kingdom to the lush forests of the Elven Realm. And you've probably seen many isekai structured similarly, but very rarely is it done to such a fascinating degree. I'd actually put the world building on the same level, if not better, than Mushoku Tensei. In fact, its world is more reminiscent of a combination of Mushoku Tensei's world and Overlord's world. The diversity not only makes the world visually stunning, but also adds layers to the depth of the story. But what enhances the world even further is the power system. Now, if you're familiar with other manhwas, or if you've watched Solo Leveling, you might have picked up on the fact that most manhwa focus their power system around some type of system, while Japanese manga and anime incorporate something similar, normally from some type of game. But sometimes they approach it in a way like Mushoku Tensei, where it's purely based on the user's talent with magic or whatever power system it is. Well, TBATE does something similar but also very different from both of these. Instead of a system, you earn all your power from the very second you're born on your own, with the sole exception of mana cores, which even then, results can be improved drastically if you work hard enough. There is no guide that tells you what to do or gives you skills to make your life easier. Everything you want needs to be worked for. And if you want to stand at the top, you have to be prepared to lose something, whether it's your family or your humanity itself. Following that logic, Arthur became one of the most powerful in the series, reaching into the realms of the very gods themselves. Whether it be the magic, the swordsmanship, knowledge, or bonds, none of them are granted just because of luck. And I love it so much because it makes not just Arthur's but all the other characters' progression seem so much more satisfying. Speaking of other characters, I want to talk about some of the side characters, mainly the relationship Arthur has with his parents. It's not that there are no other good side characters, in fact it's quite the opposite. But the main reason is because of the dynamic that Arthur has between him and his family of adventurers. You've probably heard me say it multiple times, but the relationship that they share is something I've seen in Mushoku Tensei. The struggles that both of these characters go through when it comes with their family is something that I'm extremely interested in, and one of the reasons why I've continued to watch for this long. For this part, I'm gonna have to spoil a bit, so beware for spoilers ahead. Arthur's parents have always loved him and treated him the way you'd expect any family to treat their son. No matter how strong he was, he always had a family that would treat him as a child and give him a home he could always come back to. But there was a point where Arthur had no choice and had to tell them about his previous life and who he was before and how long he's been hiding it from them. And naturally, like you'd expect, they were surprised. Not just surprised, but completely shocked to the point where Arthur's mother couldn't even focus and was on the verge of collapsing. And while Arthur's dad was furious, he was more concerned about the fact that a grown man was sucking on his wife's tits. To be honest, can't blame him. Man has his priorities straight. I'm probably not explaining it as well as I want to, but believe me, when reading it, you'll probably understand much better than me telling you this way. But it was honestly one of the hardest parts of this series to read for me personally. The way it seemed like everything was going, it seemed like Arthur was about to lose the only place he's ever been able to call home. Without his family, the lines between Arthur and Gray would blur even further. But surprisingly, after they got some time to cool off, they told Arthur that no matter what, he's still their son and he'll always have a place to come home to. Now, some of you guys may be wondering how on earth that makes these guys such good characters. Well, first off, the fact that they were able to look past basically a complete stranger being in the body of their son and possibly robbing their real son from them and completely accept Arthur as their son is not only amazing, but just goes to show how much they really care about him. No matter what happened before Arthur became their son, as soon as he was born, Arthur was a part of their family. That takes not just a certain amount of love, but also just goes to show why Arthur looks up to them so much. Not just that, but Arthur's parents are actually one of the few side characters that manage to stay relevant, or at least more relevant than most of the other side characters in the story, since almost every action he takes has something to do with his family. So naturally, they just grab your heart way more than any other of the characters really do, since they get so much more page time. There are other important and definitely good characters like Tessia, and the more the series goes on, the more complicated the relationship between Arthur and Tessia gets. But personally, I find the relationship between Arthur and his family to be way more entertaining. So with all of that said, what does TBATE change? We've talked about everything the series is good at, but what could it change in the way that other isekais are made? Well, first off, they could take the depth of the connections that Arthur has with his family, along with some other characters. Like I said previously, it's something that Mushoku Tensei does really well, and in my opinion, that's one of the reasons why it's done so well so far. When an MC has much deeper connections with other characters, you're more invested in the story as a whole, and it just makes everything in the series seem more serious in terms of tension instead of having predictable plotlines. I'm well aware that every isekai can't be a Re:Zero or a Mushoku Tensei, but it couldn't hurt to give characters a bit more depth. The second is having reasonable progression in terms of abilities. TBATE emphasizes the importance of training and gradual power progression. Arthur doesn't become invincible overnight. His journey involves rigorous training, strategic thinking, and real effort. When a character gets something almost handed to them, the power doesn't seem as rewarding or impressive as when they would reach certain heights on their own. And this doesn't just go for the MC, but also side characters. And I know this one might seem a bit weird to add, but another thing I love about TBATE is its strong female characters. TBATE actually has some well-developed female characters who play crucial roles in the story. They're not just love interests or sidekicks. They have their own arcs, strengths, and significance. Over a period of time, you just get sick of the whole damsel in distress characters, or the female supporting characters being only support. Having a female character that can stand as equals to the MC is something I'd love to see in more isekais. I'm not saying I want to have every female character just as strong as the MC, but it would be really nice if they could be more significant to the plot. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I've wanted to make this video for a long time, so I hope I explained everything well. But if I didn't, feel free to ask any questions in the comments, because I literally read all of them. Don't forget to like and subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you guys next week.